Seventh aliyah starts out with an extremely problematic verse, which I'm about to read. Now the entire earth was of one language and of uniform words. No, it wasn't. We just went through an entire aliyah that said that from the three sons, all these other people developed their own tongue, their own languages, and had their own culture, their own locations. How could the Torah possibly say this ends? That there was one language and of uniform words. It's not possible. We just read otherwise. What does this mean? What is going on? And it came to pass when they traveled from the east. It says the entire earth, but that's not possible. Okay. And it came to and it came to pass when they traveled from the east that they found a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and fire them thoroughly." So the bricks were to them for stones, and the clay was to them for mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make ourselves a name, lest we be scattered upon the face of the entire earth." But they already were scattered upon the face of the entire earth. And who are we talking about? Who are these people? Like, which of the groups of the families? Are we talking about the group from Shem? We're talking about the group from Yefet. We're talking about the group from Ham. Who came to this valley of Shinar? And like when you build a valley, you don't build a tower to watch over people in the valley, right? So it says it's in the valley, so it's not really a tower to watch. It's really a tower to watch over people, right? To control them. And of course, the midrash says that this is Nimrod who's doing this, who's gathering all the people. And the Lord descended to see the city and the tower that the sons of man had built. And the Lord said, "Lo, they are one people, and they are all have one language. And this is what they have commenced to do. Now will not be withheld from them all that they have planned. Now will it not be withheld from them all that they had planned to do." But what exactly were they planning to do? They were like, they wanted to be, they were kind of afraid. They were afraid of being, so they're in their minds, in their mindset, their goal was to unify with one voice, one language, to build a tower, right? To make ourselves a name in order to not be scattered upon the face of the earth. That's what they said in one voice, in unison. Really? Really? Do we ever have that situation where it's so uniform? It's kind of like a little bit of fascism. I've made this point many, many times. This is literally like, we see like the seeds of fascism here, because if you only have one voice, is it really possible to have one voice when you have tens of thousands, maybe millions of people together? Okay, so this is what's going on. And this is what they had. Now they all have one language. Really? And this is what they're doing. This is what they want to do. They're worried about being scattered upon the earth. They already were scattered upon the earth, but now they're coming together. So what are they really up to? Come, let us. Woo, here we go with us. Haba nidare narada vinela nivala, which is where we get nibala, which is where we get the word bavel, like nival, which is like to mix. Shem shiftachem. Share doesn't say let us. Doesn't use the word us. Okay, come let us descend. I'll have to speak to someone who knows Hebrew about this, verse 7. Confuse our language so that one will not understand the language of his companion. No, but wait a minute. What's kind of trying to understand what's going on? How do you instantly, okay, so all these people are speaking in one language, and then all of a sudden God's going to mix it up so you don't even understand your companion. Meaning, like one moment you're able to understand your like your workmate, like your friend, your companion, and then the next minute you're not able to understand them. How is that possible? How does that happen in such a quick period of time that all of a sudden you have this breakdown in communication? That's really what's going on here. So you have like, and actually, so in some ways it makes you work hard. So like you have to make yourself understood, right? So even though I'm speaking English and somebody else is like listening to this in English, they're still interpreting what I'm saying, and I'm trying to explain myself to them, and they're trying to understand what I'm saying. There's still some sort of translation going on, even though we're speaking the same language. So all of a sudden, people who are speaking the same language all of a sudden can't understand each other. So we have a fundamental breakdown of communication is what happened, even amongst people who previously were speaking the same language. It's very interesting. So it's more than that there was different languages, that even people couldn't even, they were previously working together, all of a sudden they couldn't understand each other. And the Lord scattered them from there upon the face of the entire earth. So exactly what they feared actually happened, and they ceased building the city. Therefore, he named it Babel, Babel. Who named? No, it was already named. No, we had a person. It was already named that. We already had that named. Remember, we mentioned it before. We called it Babylon. It was already mentioned before this verse. And from there, the Lord confused the language of the entire earth. But wait, but the rest of the earth, that wasn't going on. Like there's all these other people, and there's the Yefet, there was the Ham, and there was the Yefet groups, there was the Shem group and the Canaan group. So which group came together into this location? And of those, all three of them included in this big grouping that formed one language that got dispersed because they were already separated. So what's really happening here? It's interesting when you look at the verses. There's a lot of questions that come up, and this is such a short story and so important. The Tower of Babel is like one of the most quoted stories in all the Torah, but we don't really get into that. Even the most basic reading of the verses leads you to like hundreds and hundreds of questions. Therefore, he named it Babel, and there the Lord confused the language of the entire earth, and from there the Lord scattered them from upon the face of the earth. These are then it just switches, boom, boom. These are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old when he begot. Was 100 years old when this happened, and he begot Arpachshad 2 years after the flood. That's 2 years after the flood. So when did this story actually happen? How long after the flood did this all happen? Like this whole situation. And Shem lived after he begot Arpachshad 500 years, and he begot sons and daughters. And Arpachshad lived 35 years, and he begot Shelah. And Arpachshad lived after he begot Shelah 400 years and 403 years, and he begot sons and daughters. And Shelah lived 30 years, and he begot Eber. And Shelah lived, and after he begot Eber, 403 years. So obviously we haven't gotten down to the 120 years thing, but that is, as we see that the years are slowly decreasing. At the more further away we get from the flood, people are not living as long anymore. And there is a point where it's like, Sigur, nobody's going to live very long. The 120 years becomes sort of like the standard. Obviously, there are human beings who have lived longer than 120 years, but that's like the general. You take the whole world population, most people don't live beyond 120. Most people don't live beyond 100 years. I mean, obviously, Japan currently has like the most people in the world that are over 100 years old, but to live beyond 120 is extremely rare. It doesn't mean that there will be it doesn't mean there will never be somebody who doesn't live more than 120 years. It means like the vast majority of us will not live beyond 120 years. Okay. And Eber lived 34 years, and he begot Peleg. And Eber lived after he begot Peleg 430 years, and begot sons and daughters. And Peleg lived 30 years, and he begot Reu. And Peleg lived after he begot Reu 209 years, and begot sons and daughters. And Reu lived 32 years, and he begot Serug. And after he lived, and he had begotten Serug 207 years, and he begot sons and daughters. And Serug lived 30 years, and he begot Nahor. And Serug lived after he begot Nahor 200 years, and he begot sons and daughters. And Nahor lived 29 years, and he begot Terach. And Nahor lived after he begotten Terach 119 years, and he begot sons and daughters. And Terach lived 70 years, and he begot Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And these are the generations of Terach. Terach begot Abram, not Abraham yet, Avram. Nahor and Haran begot Lot. And Haran died during the lifetime of Terach, his father, in the land of his birth, in Ur of the Chaldeans, which is somewhere in Iraq. The Chaldees, which were the Chaldees even mentioned here in the previous namings of all the peoples? Okay. And Abraham and Nahor took for themselves wives. The name of Avram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, and the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. Now, Iscah and Sarai is supposed to be the same person. And Sarai was barren, and she had no child, which we know because we're going to learn about that. And Terah took Abram, his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, the wife of Abram, his son, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go to the land of Canaan. So they were already on their way. This is before Abraham this is before God spoke to Abram and promised of Canaan. He was already on his way. He was going to go. And they came as far as Haran and settled there. But they didn't quite make the full aliyah. They didn't quite make the journey. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Now, we have no idea why they started the journey. We don't even have God giving them orders to leave this location and to go on this location, to go into Canaan. We don't know why it happened. We don't have any communication that God said to do it, but they were they did leave their city, and they were in that direction. And this is going to get picked up in the next parsha. We're going to learn about Abraham, about Avram and Abraham, who becomes Abraham, the father of both Judaism and Islam. Wow, probably, I would think one of the most famous persons in human, and let's say literature, perhaps, and in the, let's say the Western world, pretty famous person. And I'm going to finish this by saying bye and Shabbat Shalom. See you next Parsha.